Alright, so now that we're going to install our intake manifold gasket, the first thing I like to do is take the same RTV blue, I like to take this RTV Ultra Black, and we're going to go ahead and just dab the corners of where the head and the block meet. Just put a very, very small amount of silicone on the block deck going across the intake manifold plane here. Okay. Same thing in the front here. Doesn't really take much. Just make sure you put a little bead on the corner, especially where the gasket has a hard time touching. And just a tad bit of silicone on here. Now these particular rubber gaskets I have here have a little alignment hole pins that go right into the block there. It makes it very easy for installation and actually prevents it from squishing out when we tighten it back up later. This one goes on the front here. You can see this has little tabs that come out right here, and they actually fit right in the block. So we're going to go ahead and stick those on. Sometimes there might be a little piece of rubber still in the block, so you'll need to take an ice pick or something and pick that out, because this is one thing that's real important. You need it to fit right, or you can have oil leaks. Okay, so we've got that settled down on there. We're going to take our silicone again, put a little dab in that little joint area here. And what I usually do is I just cover my water. This is going to be for your coolant outlet. We're going to put some sealant around our coolant outlet. Nothing on our intake runners. Little sealant around this coolant outlet. Little on the little tab there also. Same thing on the other side. Don't really have to put a lot, but just enough to cover the surface there. Alright, and actually I like to put a little dab here just to help hold the gasket in place. Just put a tiny bit on this top. This actually has a little rubber ridge on top that will probably seal it, but you never know about the imperfections on the intake manifold, so I like to put a little bit of silicone on there, like that. Okay. Now your intake manifold gaskets do fit on only one way, and it states right here, this side up. So that means if I'm going to put it on here, it's going to go this side up, which will line up with all of our ports. And what I generally do is line up your corner ends here where they're supposed to fit in the little notch on your from one gasket to the other. And once you've got that, you can move it around a little bit and just kind of eyeball exactly your bolt centers, especially on your outer bolts, because that's going to line up everything. So we're going to line these up, put a little pressure, push it against the silicone that we put on. If you put a little excess, you might be able to try to wipe it off. Got a little bit extra there. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and let that sit on there, and we're going to let that dry. Maybe give it a good hour or so to dry. There's also been times I've had a stubborn gasket that just kept sliding down or whatever, and it's okay to find a short bolt and a washer and actually put some light pressure on there, hand tighten it, and hold the gasket in place while the silicone dries. So we're going to let that set up for a while, so that way when we set the intake manifold down on it, it doesn't move anything, and should go on straight. Alright, well, now that we've let that silicone set up. We're going to go ahead and put a little bit on the top of the gasket, especially around these little water ports and all these little corners. It's really important. Should I do it? Now I've already cleaned up all the intake manifold bolts, and what we're going to do is set this manifold on. I have 4 bolts sitting aside ready for me to go, and what I'm going to do is set this on and put 1 bolt on in each corner just to hold it in position while I start the others. So I just kind of eyeball it according to my bolt holes there. Hold it in place. Shouldn't have any problem. And we'll start 4 bolts on there just to hold it centered where we want it. That way we know it's going to fit right. Shouldn't have any problem starting the rest of the bolts. So we're going to go ahead and start the rest of the bolts. We have 6 bolts on each side. Another thing is you want to be careful not to put too long of bolts in these. You should only have about 9/16 of an inch of threads that actually screw into the head. If you put too long of bolts, you can end up bending push rods and doing some major engine damage. So you got to be real careful about that. Again, once we tighten it all down, we're going to crank the engine over by hand and make sure everything still turns properly like it's supposed to. Alright, so now we've got all of our bolts just barely snugged down. Nothing's really tightened yet, and what we're going to do is we're going to take our box end wrench and we're going to just barely tighten our 2 center bolts on both sides. We're going to get just enough tension on it just so it sucks it down and the gasket and the manifold surfaces are touching. We're still not going to tighten it all the way. I could feel a little tension there. We'll go over here to this side and do the same thing. Again, we want to tighten everything evenly, left to right. These aren't really getting these aren't really tight yet. We're just going to snug them down and smash that gasket a little bit. We don't want to tighten it all the way until all that silicone dries up. So we're going to snug them down. Always start in your middle and work your way out. The general rule about tightening just about anything, really. I'm only really putting about 10 pounds of torque on these at this point in time. Okay, and we're going to let that sit another hour or so. Let all that silicone dry. In fact, I like to work in on the corners with my finger and just cover in any gaps with the excess silicone that squeezes out. That should be good there. So anyway, we're going to let that set and dry. Tighten these intake manifold bolts all the way to 30 pounds of torque. Then we're going to go ahead and paint the rest of this engine.